By now, most people know that consanguinity, a fancy name for inbreeding, can have some serious consequences. The reason why people should not inbreed is very simple. According to science, family members share close genes. If someone inherits a bad, disease-causing gene from his family, but marries far away from his family, his genes, those disease-causing genes, are not strong enough to be expressed, and they sort of get diluted, and the children will be a lot safer. But if a person inbreeds, for example, marries a cousin, let's say, if they both have the same bad genes, then their children might inherit the disease, the recessive genes in their family. And because the genes are double now, inherited from both cousins who have ironically become mommy and daddy, the bad genes become dominant. They are expressed with strength, with devastating consequences on the children being born. As most of us know, parents and their kids and full siblings share about 50% of their genes. That's just huge. First cousins share around 12.5% of their genes. That's also a lot. In people who have married a far-removed partner, their risk of having a child with the rare disabilities that we hear about may be around 2%. In first cousins, their risk doubles or triples. It can reach as high as 6%. Now, it's important to note that 94% of the time, first cousins who have children together will have unaffected children in 94% of the times. This might be a bargain for first cousin marriage lovers. 6% risk may not sound that big of a deal, but there's still a big but here. What if the first cousins also come from heavily inbred families? What if their parents were also first cousins? What if their grandparents were also first cousins? What if their whole line, counting hundreds of years back, was closely related? These first cousins will not only share 12.5% of their genes, they will share much more depending on the degree of inbreeding. And of course, the risk to their children will increase from 6% to numbers as high as God knows what. Now, this is science. It's not up to a debate whether this is true or not. It's not a philosophical question. We just need to accept it. It's a fact. Now, let's come to the Bible. What does it say about inbreeding? Before I get to the details, I can't help it. I'll just spoil the ending for you right here, right now, because I'm so proud that it was 4,000 years ago when people had so little understanding of biology or genetics, when people didn't even know that there are things called microorganisms, bacteria, that the Bible put a stop to inbreeding. Now that I have spoiled the end, let me go to the verses. Most people know that Abraham married his half-sister, and this is a sure case of inbreeding. And people will also say Jacob married two sisters as well, all documented in the Bible. We also find more cringe-worthy cases of inbreeding, like when Lot's daughters made their dad drunk to get children out of him because they thought there was no one left on earth to marry them after Sodom and Gomorrah were burnt. And of course, there's Adam and Eve as well. Their children must have married each other to populate the earth. Noah's children also, their children must have had a lot of cousin marriages. God had allowed all this until the time of Moses. We know the law came with Moses. After the miraculous exit of the people of Israel from their enslavement from Egypt, God delivered his laws to Moses, and there were specific laws on who to marry and who not to marry. The chapter that goes in depth about who to marry and who not to marry is Leviticus chapter 18. It begins by saying, "You must not do as they do in Egypt, where you used to live, and you must not do as they do in the land of Canaan, where I am bringing you. Do not follow their practices." And then, my favorite verse of all, Leviticus 18 verse 6, which says, "No one is to approach any close relative to have sexual relations. I am the Lord." This chapter is a long chapter and it goes in detail, forbids parent-child, sister-brother, grandparent-grandchild, uncle-niece, aunt-nephew, and between half-siblings and certain close in-laws. It's a very interesting read. I would recommend it to anyone. People have noted, however, that the word cousins is not mentioned here. It does say that no one must marry any close relative, but there is no specific mention of cousins. My reply to that is, what is the definition of a close relative? Obviously, siblings, grandparents, uncles, and aunts also. But a stepmother was also considered a close relative. Sleeping with a stepmother guaranteed the death penalty in the Old Testament. A mother-in-law was also a close relative. God's main concern with inbreeding was his warning: the land will spew you out if you do this. There might be other spiritual explanations, but the physical, scientific explanation, that is serious physical sickness and serious disability resulting from inbreeding, can also be enough. Like I said earlier, every time a couple inbreeds, they risk bringing out all those bad genes which should have faded away. All those mutations will concentrate each time people inbreed. And according to scientists, all sorts of horrific diseases manifest easily. There's a documentary that they did among British Pakistani people who practice first cousin marriage. According to the doctors there, they say that they see conditions, dire conditions, which otherwise wouldn't have been possible to manifest if the couples married outside of their close relations. The Christian church has traditionally veered away from first cousin marriage, and for good reason too. Some Christian denominations even go so far as to count 7 generations back, just to make sure that the partners are not related before they allow the marriage. I think that's extremely beautiful. It allows friendships with different tribes, with distant tribes. Different tribes are not your foes, they are your potential in-laws. It keeps the integrity of the family as family, it protects children, and diversifies the genetic pool. So beautiful and so scientific. And of course, it all started with God's word on Leviticus 18:6. Do not marry a close relative. How close is close? 7 generations back seems reasonable, far enough for me. I'm so proud of the Bible.